Well, maybe some guys from television or something. I don't know. Well, whenever I sing, that's what I really mean. Like I'm singing a song. I don't sing it if I don't mean it.
This is the voice of an 11-year-old Michael Jackson, but it doesn't sound like a child at all. Listen to it.
Yes, well, it's pretty sunny out here. Like it a little bit better.
Do you dig it?
Yeah, it's cold in Indiana.
There's pain in this voice. There's struggle. There's a kind of emotional depth that most people don't develop until they've lived through years of heartbreak and hardship. And yet, he was only 11 years old. How is that even possible? In this video, I'm going to break down the exact note, one single moment in this performance, that proves Michael Jackson wasn't just a talented kid. He was a true musical prodigy. But I'm also going to show you something much darker, the hidden truth behind that voice, and the shocking price he had to pay for carrying this kind of talent at such a young age. Because behind every legendary voice, there's always a story that people don't want to talk about. Chapter 1, 1969. The world discovers a prodigy. In August 1958, in a small industrial city called Gary, Indiana, a baby boy named Michael Joseph Jackson was born into a large, struggling family. No one at the time could have predicted that this child would one day change the face of music forever. From a very young age, Michael showed signs that he was different. While other kids his age were still learning how to speak clearly, Michael was already singing. He would imitate the voices he heard on the radio: James Brown, Jackie Wilson, Sam Cooke, with shocking accuracy. His mother, Catherine, later recalled that Michael had an unusual ability to remember lyrics and melodies after hearing a song only once or twice. But it wasn't just his voice. Michael had an instinctive sense of rhythm and performance. Even as a small child, he would watch his older brothers rehearse and then copy their dance moves perfectly, often adding his own flair. The Jackson family didn't have much money, but they had music. And in that small house on Jackson Street, music became both an escape and a way of survival. However, behind this early talent was a father who saw something more than just a gifted child. Joe Jackson was a strict, hardworking man who had once dreamed of his own music career. When he realized how talented his sons were, he began pushing them relentlessly. Rehearsals were long, intense, and often harsh. Mistakes were not tolerated.
I remember hearing my mother scream, "Joe, you're gonna kill him, you're gonna kill him, stop it, you're gonna kill him," and I was so fast, he couldn't catch me half the time, but when he would catch me, oh my God, it was bad.
Michael later described in interviews how his father would sometimes use physical discipline to make sure the boys performed at their best.
I don't think he realizes to this day how scared. Scared. So scared that I would regurgitate.
It was a tough environment, but it was also the environment that shaped one of the greatest entertainers the world has ever seen. By the time Michael was 5 or 6 years old, his talent had already become impossible to ignore within the family. He could sing with more emotion and control than many adult singers. His brothers noticed it too. Even though he was the youngest, Michael often took the lead during rehearsals. His voice had a clarity and power that stood out, even when he was just a little boy. In 1964, when Michael was only 6 years old, the Jackson brothers officially formed a group. At first, Michael played the conga drums while his older brothers sang. But it didn't take long for everyone to realize that the youngest member had something special. His voice was simply too good to keep in the background. By the time he was 8 years old, Michael had become the lead singer of the group. The Jackson 5 began performing in local talent shows, clubs, and strip malls around Gary and nearby Chicago. Word started to spread quickly. People who saw them perform couldn't believe that such a powerful, soulful voice was coming from such a small child. Michael would often bring the audience to tears or get them dancing on their feet, depending on the song. His stage presence was already magnetic. He knew how to connect with people, how to move, and how to deliver a song with real feeling. It was during one of these local performances that the Jackson 5 caught the attention of important people in the music industry. In 1967, they won a major talent competition at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, one of the most legendary venues for black artists at the time. This victory opened doors. Soon they were being noticed by bigger names in the business. One of the most important moments came when Motown Records, the most successful black-owned record label in America, began showing serious interest. Motown founder Berry Gordy and his team were known for discovering and developing young talent. When they heard the Jackson 5, they were immediately impressed, not just by the group, but especially by the youngest member. Berry Gordy later said that Michael's voice had a quality that was rare, even among professional adult singers. In 1968, after months of negotiations and preparation, the Jackson 5 officially signed with Motown Records. Michael was only 10 years old. The family moved from Gary, Indiana to Los Angeles, California to begin working with some of the best songwriters, producers, and musicians in the industry. It was a dream come true for many families, but for Michael, it also meant leaving behind whatever was left of his childhood. By early 1969, Motown was ready to introduce the Jackson 5 to the world. They recorded their first album, and one of the songs they worked on was a soulful ballad written by Smokey Robinson called "Who's Lovin' You?" It wasn't even planned to be the main single. That honor went to "I Want You Back." But when people heard Michael sing "Who's Lovin' You?", something changed. Here was an 11-year-old boy pouring emotion into a song about lost love as if he had experienced it himself. His voice carried a depth, a maturity, and a pain that didn't match his age. The first time the executives at Motown heard the final recording, many of them were stunned. How could a child sing with that much soul? That question would follow Michael Jackson for the rest of his life. Because while the world was about to fall in love with his voice, very few people truly understood what it had taken for that voice to exist. Behind the magic was years of strict training, family pressure, and the loss of a normal childhood. In the next part of this video, I'm going to break down the specific moment in Who's Lovin' You that proves Michael Jackson was not just talented. He was a true musical prodigy. And more importantly, I'm going to show you the hidden cost behind that extraordinary gift. Chapter 2. The Undeniable Proof. The Note of a Prodigy. But today, I want to take you inside the recording studio in 1969 and show you something that happened during one of the very first sessions for the Jackson 5 at Motown. It was a warm afternoon in Los Angeles. The kind of day where the sunlight came through the blinds and made long lines across the wooden floor of the studio. Inside the control room, a group of producers, engineers, and Motown executives sat quietly behind the glass, waiting. They had already heard the older Jackson brothers sing. They were good, tight harmonies, good energy. But they were waiting for the youngest one. Michael was only 11 years old at the time. He walked into the vocal booth wearing a simple shirt and pants, looking small in that big, quiet room. One of the producers leaned toward the microphone and said in a calm but firm voice, "All right, Michael, let's try Who's Lovin' You. Just relax and sing it like you feel it." The track started playing. For the first few lines, Michael sang carefully, almost like he was still testing the room. Then came the moment. In the line, "I treated you bad," he reached for a high note, and something changed in the room. The engineers later said the control room went almost completely silent. One of them even stopped adjusting the knobs on the mixing board and just stared at the speakers. The note wasn't just high. It had a fullness, a brightness, and an emotional weight that didn't belong to a child. The overtones in his voice filled the entire frequency range in a way that made the sound feel alive. After the take ended, nobody spoke for a few seconds. Then one of the older producers slowly took off his headphones and said, almost to himself, "That's not an 11-year-old boy singing." Another person in the room actually stood up and walked closer to the glass, as if he needed to see Michael's face to believe what he had just heard. They asked him to do it again, and then again. Each time, Michael delivered that same note with the same power and control. By the third or fourth take, some of the people in the control room were shaking their heads in disbelief. One engineer later told a story that he had worked with many professional adult singers, but he had never heard a child produce that kind of overtone richness, that natural brightness and depth, without years of training. What made it even more shocking was how small Michael looked standing in that vocal booth. His feet could barely reach the floor properly when he sat on the stool they gave him. And yet, when he opened his mouth, the sound that came out carried the emotional weight of someone who had lived much longer. Some people in that room that day began to whisper among themselves. They wondered where this sound was coming from. Was it just natural talent, or was there something else? Something about the way he had been raised and trained that had forced his voice to develop so early. Because even back then, a few people close to the situation already suspected that behind this incredible voice was a childhood that had been anything but normal. Joe Jackson had been pushing his sons hard for years. Long rehearsals, strict discipline, very little time for play. Some believed that the pressure Michael had been under since he was very small had somehow found its way into his singing. That single note in "I Treated You Bad" became the moment that made several people at Motown realize they weren't just working with talented kids. They were working with something much rarer. And it all came from an 11-year-old boy who still had to be helped down from the tall stool after the session ended. Chapter 3. The Astonishing Vocal Technique of an 11-year-old. But it wasn't only that one high note that shocked everyone. Throughout the entire recording of "Who's Lovin' You," Michael kept doing things with his voice that made the adults in the room exchange looks with each other. There were moments where he would add small riffs and vocal runs, quick little decorations between the main notes. These weren't written in the song. Michael was creating them on the spot. And they weren't sloppy or childish. They were clean, musical, and placed exactly where they should be to make the emotion stronger. One of the songwriters in the session later recalled that he had to keep checking the clock on the wall because he kept forgetting how old the singer was. He said it felt like they were working with a seasoned session singer who had been in the business for 15 or 20 years. Then there was the way Michael used his breath. In some parts of the song, he would let just a little air slip through his voice. Not too much, just enough to make the line feel more vulnerable and human. It was a very delicate technique. Most children either sing with too much air and sound weak, or they sing with too much force and lose the feeling. Michael seemed to already understand the balance. His vibrato was another thing that stood out. When he held long notes, his voice would naturally waver in a smooth, even way. It gave the sound warmth and maturity. For an 11-year-old to have such steady vibrato without forcing it was extremely unusual. But perhaps the most surprising moment came near the end of the song during the "Hey, ow, ow" part. Michael added a little grit and distortion to his voice, just a touch of roughness. It wasn't loud or aggressive. It was controlled and intentional. He used it to express frustration and emotion in the lyrics. After he did it the first time, one of the producers actually laughed in surprise and said, "Where did that come from?" They asked him to do it again, and he delivered it with the same control. By the end of the session, the atmosphere in the control room had completely changed. The people who had come in expecting to work with a cute kid group were now sitting in silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Some of them later admitted that they felt a strange mix of excitement and unease. Excitement because they knew they had discovered something special. Unease because they couldn't fully understand how an 11-year-old could already sing with that much technique and emotional depth. There's a story that one of the engineers told years later. After the session ended, he stayed behind in the studio alone for a while. He kept replaying parts of Michael's vocal take, listening again and again. He said he kept thinking about his own children at home and how different their voices sounded compared to what he had just heard. He couldn't stop wondering what kind of life this boy must have lived to sing like that. Of course, we know now that Michael's childhood was far from ordinary. The long hours of rehearsal, the constant pressure from his father, and the responsibility of being the lead singer of his family group had shaped him in ways most people couldn't see from the outside. While other children were playing and going to school, Michael was learning how to deliver emotion through his voice under very strict conditions. That combination of natural gift and intense early pressure created a singer who, at just 11 years old, already had the technical skill and emotional maturity of someone much older. But as we'll see later in this video, this kind of early brilliance often comes with a hidden cost, one that Michael would carry with him for the rest of his life. Chapter 4: The Price, a Childhood Lost. But here's the part of the story that makes everything we just heard feel heavier. While the world was falling in love with that 11-year-old boy's voice, almost no one knew what it had actually cost him to sound that way. Michael Jackson did not have a childhood in the way most of us understand it. While other kids were running outside after school, playing games and making friends, Michael was often inside a small, dimly lit room with his brothers, rehearsing for hours under his father's watchful eyes. There are stories from people who knew the family that rehearsals sometimes lasted until late at night, even on school days. If someone made a mistake, Joe Jackson would stop everything. He would make them start the entire routine again from the beginning. And if he felt they weren't trying hard enough, the consequences were often physical. Michael later spoke about how his father would sometimes stand in the doorway with a belt in his hand during rehearsals. The fear of being hit was enough to keep the boys focused for hours. There was very little room for laughter or rest. Michael once recalled in an interview that he would sometimes see other children playing outside the window while he was forced to practice his singing and dancing again and again. He said it made him feel like he was missing something important, but he never had the chance to join them. By the time he was 8 or 9 years old, Michael had already become the main source of hope for his entire family. His father saw the group as their way out of poverty. Every performance, every rehearsal, and every note Michael sang carried the weight of his family's survival. He wasn't just singing because he loved it. He was singing because he had to. If the group succeeded, the family could escape the small house in Gary, Indiana. If they failed, they would stay trapped in the same difficult life. That kind of pressure on a child is difficult to imagine. There are accounts from people close to the Jackson family that describe how Michael would sometimes cry quietly after particularly harsh rehearsals, but he learned very early not to show his emotions too openly. He became quiet and careful with his words. Even as a young boy, he developed a habit of watching and listening more than he spoke. Some who knew him during those early years said he often had a distant, almost sad look in his eyes, even when he was smiling on stage. When the Jackson 5 finally signed with Motown and moved to Los Angeles, things did not become easier. The schedule became even more demanding. There were recording sessions, dance rehearsals, television appearances, and constant traveling. Michael was still a child, but he was living like a working adult. He spent more time in studios and on stages than he did in classrooms. His education suffered. His social life barely existed. And the one thing he was allowed to do, singing, came with enormous expectations. What makes this even more painful is that the very thing that made Michael special, his voice, was also the thing that took his childhood away. The more talented he proved to be, the harder everyone pushed him. The more the audience loved him, the less space he had to be a normal boy. By the time he recorded Who's Lovin' You at 11 years old, he had already spent years carrying responsibilities that no child should have to carry. Many people who have studied Michael Jackson's life believe that the pressure he faced during these early years played a major role in the struggles he would face later in life. The loneliness, the difficulty trusting people, the obsession with perfection, and even some of his later health issues have been connected by those close to him to the way he was raised. The same gift that made him a superstar also isolated him from the normal experiences of growing up. It is both beautiful and heartbreaking to listen to that 11-year-old boy sing with so much soul and maturity. Because now we understand that the depth in his voice didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of strict training, emotional pressure, and the loss of a normal childhood. Every time he hit a difficult note or added emotion to a line, he was drawing from experiences that most adults never have to face. That is the hidden truth behind the voice we heard in the studio that day in 1969. It wasn't just talent. It was talent shaped by sacrifice, discipline, and pain. And while the world would soon celebrate Michael Jackson as a prodigy, very few people at the time understood what he had already given up to become one. Chapter 5. A Legacy That Still Resonates. 17 years have passed since Michael Jackson left this world on June 25, 2009. And yet, here we are in 2026, still talking about him with the same fascination and emotion as if he had just performed yesterday. Today, on the exact anniversary of his death, fans around the world are once again gathering, some listening to his music together, others watching old performances, and many reflecting on the life of a man who changed music forever. What makes this moment even more powerful is the recent release of the biopic Michael, starring his nephew, Jafar Jackson. For many people, watching that film has been like seeing Michael come back to life on screen. Jafar captured not only the moves and the voice, but also the quiet intensity and vulnerability that Michael carried with him. The success of the movie has brought a whole new generation of listeners to his music. Young people who were not even born when Michael was alive are now discovering songs like "Who's Lovin' You?" and asking the same question that people asked back in 1969. How could someone so young sing with that much soul? But even with all the new attention, one thing remains clear. There has never been, and probably will never be, another voice quite like Michael Jackson's. When we listen to that 11-year-old boy in the studio, we are not just hearing good singing. We are hearing something that feels almost impossible to replicate. Over the decades, many talented child singers have come and gone. Some had strong voices, some had great stage presence. But very few, if any, managed to combine technical skill, emotional depth, and natural charisma the way Michael did at such a young age. His voice had a quality that was completely his own. It was bright but warm at the same time. It could sound innocent in one moment and carry the weight of deep pain in the next. Even today, when producers and vocal coaches study old recordings of Michael, they often say the same thing. There is a uniqueness in his tone and phrasing that is extremely difficult to copy. Many singers have tried to imitate his style over the years, but something always feels missing. It is not just about hitting the notes or adding riffs. It is about the feeling behind the voice, and that feeling came from a life experience that no one else has ever truly duplicated. From the audience's perspective, listening to Michael Jackson sing as a child creates a strange and powerful mix of emotions. There is wonder, of course. Wonder at how someone so young could already understand emotion so deeply. But there is also a quiet sadness. Because now that we know more about his childhood, we cannot help but hear the story behind the voice. We hear the long rehearsals. We hear the pressure from his father. We hear the loneliness of a boy who spent more time in studios than on playgrounds. That knowledge changes the way we listen. What once sounded like pure talent now also sounds like sacrifice. This is why Michael Jackson's legacy feels so different from most other artists. His story is not just about the music. It is about what it means to be gifted at a very high level from a very young age. It is about the cost of fame when it arrives before a person even has the chance to understand who they are. And it is about how that early pressure can shape and sometimes damage a person for the rest of their life. Even 17 years after his death, people are still trying to understand him. The biopic has sparked new conversations. Fans are sharing old videos and debating his influence on music, dance, and popular culture. On this anniversary, many are choosing to focus not only on his struggles, but also on his incredible achievements and the joy he brought to millions of people around the world. His music continues to be played everywhere, from small bedrooms to large stadiums. His dance moves are still being studied and copied by new generations of performers. And his voice, especially those early recordings, still has the power to stop people in their tracks. So I want to ask you something honestly. When you listen to that 11-year-old Michael Jackson singing "Who's Lovin' You," what do you feel? Do you feel amazed by the talent? Do you feel sad about the childhood he lost? Or do you feel both at the same time? Because for many people, it is impossible to separate the two. The voice that shocked the world in 1969 was also the voice of a boy who was carrying far more than any child should have to carry. That is the lasting power of Michael Jackson. Even after all these years, his story continues to move us, to make us think, and to make us feel. His voice remains unmatched, not just because of how it sounded, but because of everything it represented. And as long as people keep listening, his legacy will continue to live on, echoing far beyond the studio where that 11-year-old boy once stood and sang like he had already lived a lifetime. Some people believe that Michael Jackson's voice was a gift from God, something rare and special that he was meant to share with the world. And when you listen to him at just 11 years old, it's easy to understand why. That kind of talent doesn't come around often. He gave us so much through his music, even though it came at a very high personal cost. As we remember him today, maybe the most important thing we can do is not only celebrate his genius, but also acknowledge the boy who carried it. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Take care.